In 2015, Supergirl premiered on the CBS television network with much fanfare. 40 years before, ISIS, the very first TV superheroine with her own show, appeared on the very same network. Both owe their inspiration to a near-forgotten superheroine from the Golden Age. Our story begins in 1940. Kids on playgrounds everywhere could be heard shouting, "Shazam!" It was the magic word which transformed mild-mannered Billy Batson into the superheroic Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel was America's favorite superhero. He outsold Superman, Batman, Captain America, and many of the other heroes that are still around today. Sales were amazing. So amazing that the publisher, Fawcett Publications, decided that it should expand the Captain Marvel universe. In late 1941, a young, high-energy spin-off was born. Captain Marvel Jr. quickly took over the cover position of Master Comics and then launched into his own title. Sales boomed. Fawcett wanted more. They turned to science fiction writer Otto Bender. Bender was a pulp magazine writer who made his way into comics through his artist brother Jack. Jack Bender owned an art shop that freelanced for many publishers. Otto freelanced there until Fawcett began their own comic line in 1940. Otto Bender was one of their very first hires. After the success of Captain Marvel Jr., Bender was given the task to create another Marvel spin-off. Teaming up with artist Mark Swayze, they came up with the idea of a female version of Captain Marvel. They called her Mary Marvel. We may laugh at the name, but superheroines were still a new concept at this time, and superheroines were even newer. Before Mary Marvel, the number of superheroines out there could be counted on one's fingers. Mary's story begins with Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel's alter ego, Billy Batson, is a young orphan who is lured to an abandoned subway platform by a shadowy stranger who leads him to the wizard Shazam. The old wizard gives Billy powers from mythological characters. The first letter of each mythological character spells out the wizard's name. With the shout, "Shazam!" a lightning bolt flash transforms Billy into the big red cheese known as Captain Marvel. Mary Marvel made her debut in Captain Marvel Adventures number 18. In this story, Nurse Sarah Prim lays on her deathbed. She confesses to Billy Batson that he has a sister. She tells Billy that he can identify her because she wears half of a broken locket. Prim does not give Billy her name, but does give him the other half of the broken locket before she passes away. Billy goes back to his job as a radio announcer and discovers that a contestant on his quiz show is wearing the other half of the broken locket. She is a young socialite, Mary Bromfield. After the radio show, Captain Marvel along with Captain Marvel Jr. go to investigate Mary Bromfield. They arrive just in time to stop a kidnapping attempt. The kidnappers are quickly taken care of, and Captain Marvel reveals to Mary that Billy Batson is her brother. She ponders why the superhero showed up instead of Batson. Then, Captain Marvel reveals who he really is. Captain Marvel Jr. reveals who he is as well. While the siblings celebrate their reunion, the kidnappers get the upper hand and stop Billy and Freddy from changing back into the Marvels. Mary accidentally calls on the power of Shazam for help. A lightning bolt strikes and transforms her into a superpowered being. She takes out the kidnappers and rescues Billy and Freddy. All three wonder the why and how Mary acquired her superpowers. They go to the wizard Shazam to find out. They discover that Shazam knew all the time. This time, a group of female figures from mythology have blessed Mary with their power. Like the figures that gave Billy his power, this group also spells out the name Shazam. Bender and Swayze wanted her to be the all-American sweetheart. They modeled her looks on Hollywood superstar Judy Garland. Her alter ego's name, Mary Bromfield, may have been taken from Pulitzer Prize-winning writer Louis Bromfield. In New York literary circles, Bromfield was the toast of the town in the early 1940s. He was a humanist and a well-known activist. As a writer, He was known for writing very strong female characters, and he had released 2 novels in the year prior to Mary Marvel's creation. Mary Marvel took to the sky like the previous spin-off. She took over the cover position of WOW Comics and her own title shortly after. The threesome of Marvels were so popular together that a new title featuring all 3 was launched, The Marvel Family. However, it was this popularity that would lead to the end of Captain Marvel and the entire Fawcett line. Rival publisher DC National had seen enough. They decided the best way to stop the Marvels was to take them to court. They felt that Captain Marvel was a little too close to their top superhero, Superman. In 1940, they had sued and won a copyright violation lawsuit against Fox Publications. DC lawyers slapped Fawcett with legal action the following year. The legal battle lasted 12 years. In 1953, while the case was still in appeal, Fawcett Publications dropped their entire comic book line. The lawsuit, the crusade against comic book violence, a major drop in sales for all publishers led to this decision. DC and Fawcett came to terms shortly after the cancellation. Fawcett closed down their entire comic book operation. They laid off the artists and writers. This should have been a downtime for Otto Bender, but 1953 turned out to be a great year for him. DC Comics quickly jumped on him when his services became available. But more importantly, Bender and his wife Ione were blessed with the birth of their daughter, who they decided to name Mary after his superheroine. DC assigned Bender to Superman. After all, Bender was the storyteller who had made Captain Marvel as popular as he was. He created and expanded the Superman universe the same way as he expanded Captain Marvel's. He created supervillains such as Bizarro and Brainiac. He created the Intergalactic Legion of Superheroes. In 1958, he created a female spin-off of Superman, and copying his earlier work on Mary Marvel, Bender created Supergirl. Supergirl is the blood relative to Superman. Instead of being a long-lost sister, Supergirl is Superman's long-lost cousin. Her costume and relationship to Superman is almost identical to Mary Marvel's. At first, she was a backup strip behind Superman in Action Comics. Eventually, she moved over to the lead feature in a struggling DC title, Adventure Comics. In 1973, it was time for the Marvels to return to the comic book racks. DC Comics licensed the Marvels from Fawcett, but there was a problem. Fawcett Publishing had failed to renew the trademark on the name when it came due. Other publishers pounced on it. In 1966, MF Enterprises launched a very short-lived and poorly distributed Captain Marvel in name-only character. In 1967, Marvel Comics launched their own character with that name. DC Comics settled on renaming the title Shazam after the old wizard who had given the Marvels their power. Shazam featured the entire Marvel family, including Mary Marvel. In 1980, DC Comics purchased the characters from Fawcett, and they've been part of the DC universe ever since. Otto Bender is one of the most astounding writers in comic book history. It is estimated that he wrote some 50,000 pages of published comics. In addition to being a staff writer at Fawcett during the Golden Age, he freelanced for DC, Timely, Quality, and EC. After becoming a staff writer for DC, he continued freelancing for companies like Gold Key. Unfortunately, Bender's life outside of comics became full of tragedy. The hard times began in 1960 after he left DC Comics. Bender was a firm believer of UFOs and extraterrestrial life. This wasn't a popular held view in the early 1960s. He invested his savings and mortgaged his house to become a partner in Space World magazine. Space World featured stories about space exploration, science, and UFOs. The magazine lost money from day one. On the verge of bankruptcy, he returned to DC Comics in 1967. Shortly after his return, his daughter Mary was hit by a car as she walked to school. The Benders took her death hard. Mary was their only child. Ione Bender had a nervous breakdown, and Otto took to the bottle. His last comic book work was a Superman story for the June 1969 issue of Action Comics. Bender continued writing. In 1970, he published a book about ancient astronaut theory called Unsolved Mysteries of the Past. And in 1974, he published Mankind, Child of the Stars. That same year, Captain Marvel made another comeback, this time on television. Shazam started out as a half-hour live-action show on Saturday mornings. The Filmation Studios decided to expand the series to a full hour by adding a new female character to the show. Initially, they wanted to do Mary Marvel, but DC Comics, who controlled the rights through Fawcett Publishing, was asking too high of a price. Instead, Filmation decided that they would invent their own superheroine to fill the half-hour slot. The Secrets of ISIS would take to the air in the fall of 1975. That makes her the first superheroine to have her own weekly TV show, predating both Wonder Woman and the Bionic Woman. ISIS was heavily inspired by Mary Marvel and borrowed elements from other mythology-based superheroes. Mary Marvel is more than a comic book footnote. She was an integral part of the greatest superhero franchise of the Golden Age. She may not have the appeal that she once did, but her influence can be seen in the superheroine she later inspired. The same can be said about her creator as well. Binder's influence on the comic book medium is immense. He was the architect to two of the greatest heroes in all of comicdom, Captain Marvel and Superman. The stories and characters that came out of his imagination are with us today and will be influencing the writers of tomorrow.